I promise you, you have something unique to give to the world. The camera doesn't matter. If you've got an iPhone or Android, you've got what you need. You have the technology. Now figure out the value in the voice and understand what the audience wants that you want to go after. Or maybe you have to find a different audience that will relate to you in a different way. But if you stay at it and you put in the time and you put in the work and you test and you really focus on providing value for people and you're in it for the long run, it may not be what you think it's going to be, but it will be incredibly valuable for you.
Hey, this is Raina Campbell, your Chief Dream Driver, and welcome to the No Parking Podcast, where through conversations and discussions with creators like yourself, we'll find interesting approaches to help you take your dreams out of park, put them in drive, and ride towards success. Hey, Dream Drivers, welcome to episode 226 of the Dreams and Drive podcast. And today we are going to be speaking with Tim Staples, who's the author of Break Through the Noise, the 9 Rules to Capture Global Attention. Tim is going to give us a front seat driver's ed lesson on what it takes to stand out and create shareable content that grows your community. A lot of us are spending a lot of time and feeling like the content we're creating isn't really resonating or helping grow our following and our social community. So Tim's going to talk to us about what we can do to make sure that it is. We're also going to talk about his background and his rise in the industry, his agency Shareability, and then he's going to dive deep into some of the takeaways that we can start implementing in our own brands, our own lives, and start seeing results. And so I read the book. It was phenomenal, and I really want you guys to read it as well. So we're going to be doing a giveaway. So if you want to enter to win a copy of Break Through the Noise, just go to dreamsanddrive.com/win. That's dreamsanddrive.com/win. The tips that he shares are super, super helpful, and they're things that you can do today. You don't have to wait to get special technology or special, reports and stuff. None of that. You can really implement all the tips that he shares right now in your business and your brand. If you love this episode, please share it with a friend. This episode is going to have a lot of super, super specific marketing tips. So for anybody who needs some marketing help, this is an episode that you want to send them. Please make sure to tag us on social. You can find us across the board, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Dreams and Drive, and use that hashtag Dreams and Drive when sharing as well. And if you want to join our weekly newsletter community, The Keys, just go to dreamsanddrive.com/join. That's dreamsanddrive.com/join. Remember, we send out weekly emails, so you want to make sure you're on that list because that's the place to be to get weekly exclusives and updates and announcements about Dreams and Drive. All right, let's get to the episode.
Hey, Raina, how are you?
Well, I'm excited to have you on the show today. You are going to be telling our dream driving or teaching our dream driving audience about how they can create shareable content and taking from your own career journey and your own stories, working with huge brands, creating some dope content. But before we get to that, Tim, I love to start our interviews going back in time, right? I want to know, who was Tim the child? What was inspiring you as a kid?
It sounds funny now, but when I was growing up in the 80s, I loved advertising.
Really?
It seemed so glamorous, and it was still big and cool back then. When it was like the beginning of Air Jordan and McDonald's and all these big airlines commercials. Like I said, it sounds crazy now, but my dad ran a local advertising shop where I grew up in Milwaukee, and just being around it, I thought it was just the coolest thing. And I was kind of an introspective kid. I was a big time daydreamer, so I would just think about ideas all day long. But it was all in the scope of advertising, which sounds crazy. Most kids are into music or movies or film or television, but I like the ads.
But you know what? That's not crazy, because if you think about what you're doing now, right? And of course, you're not necessarily doing advertising per se, but some of those core concepts are still the things that excite you now.
For sure. And I feel like in the last, 20, 30 years, it's kind of flipped on its head, where, it used to be about a brand would beat their chest and have these big budgets and project it out to the world. And now that just repels people, right? It's just very interruptive, and nobody wants to be a part of that. And so the flip side of that is how do you create content that people actually want to watch? Mm-hmm. And so it's become much more like Hollywood or television or movies. it's like, it's got to be super compelling and people got to connect to it. And I think that's what I'm drawn to.
Has to make you cry.
That's right. Make you laugh or make you cry.
Some kind of strong emotion. But let's talk about that road to where you are today, right? What was the dream for you as a young adult? Because I know you went to school for journalism, but was that like, did you see journalism being the way that you could become a storyteller?
Yeah. So when I went to college, I went to the University of Missouri through the journalism school, and I actually went through advertising department. And I was sure that I was going to go to Leo Burnett in Chicago and write ads for McDonald's. And so even in that was in the late 90s. And so that even sounded cool at the time. And then right at the last second, I had it all wired up. And I met this guy in Texas that was running a sports marketing company and representing people like Scottie Pippen and Reggie White and big NFL and NBA players. And I took a U-turn right at the last second and got into sports.
Ooh, did you like it?
It was different. I'd always see myself being kind of a writer and a creative. And then it got me into, understanding how to put deals together and kind of the power of celebrity and athletes and the impact that would have. And, I always say, like, as a 25-year-old copywriter, I was a nobody. But if I was standing next to Scottie Pippen, I'd be talking to the CEO. Right. And that was kind of an early lesson that left an impact on me.
What do you think were some of the other lessons or major skills that you were learning during this stage in your career?
Yeah, one of the things I learned early on that I think would be relevant for your audience is that I wanted to be a creative, and I thought it was all about the ideas. But if you can't sell, those ideas are worthless. And so when I was really young, when I was in high school, my dad said to me, I said, "Hey, I'm going to go into advertising. I'm going to be a writer." And he said, "No, you should be a salesman." And I thought that was like so disrespectful. Like, it just was the opposite of what I wanted to do. And it just felt so wrong to me. And I thought he was just complete idiot. Right. And it turned out that he was absolutely right, because if you can't sell, you can't bring your creative genius to light. And I've seen so many people that are so brilliant, but they end up in the back room, writing or doing or working for somebody else because they can't get their ideas across the line. And so that was the second early lesson, is you got to be able to sell. You can still be a creative, but you got to be able to sell or your ideas are worthless.
So quick pit stop. That reminded me. So when I was in college, I was part of an internship program that partnered me with CBS Corporation for 4 summers. So every summer I was going to New York City, interning at CBS in different departments. And upon graduating, like, everyone said, well, my mentor always said to me, get a sales job, right? But as a 22-year-old graduating from Princeton, I'm like, I don't want to work in sales, because it was always like when you went to the sales floor, they looked so sad. They were always like complaining about things. The only people that looked happy were like the top guys. And I regret that now to this day, because I do think if I had of gotten some sort of media sales experience, it could have helped. Because I went into the nonprofit world instead of that. But it's something that I heard too, even like 2013, sales. It's really important no matter where you go.
It's a piece of the puzzle that you got to figure out. And like you said, it's better to figure it out first and early when you're young and you're up for anything than try to figure it out when you're in your 30s or 40s and you have to add it. But I love that. But I also say, like, going to nonprofit, you learn a lot of life skills there too, right? Like,
most definitely. Because I was working with people in prison, so it was it was definitely and just the environment, like the politics, right? I feel like any first job, if it's good, you'll learn a lot about life and you'll learn about how to work with people in the real world and not in like the collegiate world. You know what I mean?
For sure. And it's funny. I've actually seen some of the best salespeople I've ever seen that come out of the nonprofit world, because you got to fight for every penny, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like you're almost everybody in that world is a salesperson.
You have to sell the mission of the organization, right? Amen. Because you're not really having a product, but you're selling a mission. And to try to convince someone that they should be donating to people who are in prison to get a college education, you definitely learn how to like get a compelling story around.
Yeah, so maybe you did take a sales job right out of college.
Oh, you know what? Maybe I did. But thinking about that sales, like, what do you think? If do you remember a time early in your career where you had to put on that sales hat and it was a win for you?
Early days, we started representing athletes. And so we'd be deal guys when I first started. And so we wanted to kind of ramp it up, and I wanted to get into the creative side. So one of the early wins was that we actually went to Ameritech in Chicago, which is one of those. It's now AT&T. It was the local bell for AT&T, and we pitched. They had Scottie Pippen as an endorsement partner, but they didn't know who was going to do the ads around it. So I actually spent all weekend, creating all these ads, and me and my boss went up and pitched them this crazy ad concept from this company that had never done ads before. And they looked at us like we were crazy, but they actually bought them. And so the coolest kind of first win was seeing, my ad that I had written both on a billboard in downtown Chicago, and then actually seeing it on television for the first time. And I was like, oh, wow, we can do this.
What inspired you then to branch out from the agency and start your own? Because that must have been a pivotal moment for you.
Yeah, I just saw, we saw the sports business, and we grew a business, and we ended up selling it to a company called Omnicom, which is a big advertising holding company. And in that process, I got to work with all the big advertising companies like BBDO and DDB and Chiat Day. And I kind of saw the good, the bad, and the ugly of that world. And it was right when that world was still on top, but you just see it was about to take a pretty big fall. So that just inspired me. I knew that there was something different, and I knew that brands had to think differently. And so I just, after the earnout, I was in Texas at the time, and I just packed up and moved to California, and I was like, I'm doing my own thing. And I didn't even know what it was, but I just knew I wanted to connect brands and Hollywood and celebrities and start telling stories.
So that was Converge. At that point, it was called Converge.
Exactly. And so that was, I started Converge in 2004, and it was the early days of the internet. And so social media wasn't really happening yet. So it was a different time. But what I saw already very early was that the celebrities had all the power, whereas in the past, the networks and the studios, they all own the pipe, right? They own the megaphone, so they could kind of control the conversation. And there was a shift that happened in the late 90s and early 2000s where you could just start to see it, that the talent was going to carry much more of the conversation, even before social media really blew up. So we started doing all these unique kind of ways to tell stories with celebrities. They're kind of hybrid ads. We threw a lot of kind of celebrity events with big brands and just kind of pushed the conversation forward in a bunch of different ways. And that's how I got my start with Converge.
What were some of the early principles that you were seeing in what was making content shareable? Because at that point, I guess people weren't sharing it as we know now, but what were some of the key things that you saw that were resonating with the audience at that time?
Yeah, so the big moment for me is I took over a beach house in Malibu about 10 years ago. And we threw all these celebrity events. So we actually engineered this model for brands and how they would underwrite celebrity events and get a lot of value out of it. So this kind of culminated. We did a Grammys party with Mariah Carey. We did a BET party. We did all these parties. And then I took over a beach house in Malibu for the summer, and we threw 40 celebrity events in 60 days. So
wow. That seems insane.
It was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. And so it was like Jamie Foxx and Sylvester Stallone and the Kardashians in the early days and the cast of The Office and, Miley Cyrus. And so it was nuts. And so, but that was kind of my moment because every day I saw these celebrities come in, and it was right when social media was just starting to blow up, and you could just see it. It was like seeing the future, right? Like they were literally being able to, communicate with an audience of millions of people every day without a studio or a network or a record label. And you're just like, wow, this is it. And that was kind of the moment where I was like, all right, this is going to change everything. And this is what I'm going to do with the next 20 years of my life.
That's what you've been doing ever since, basically, right?
Yeah. And honestly, from that point, I dove right into the digital side, and it was just too early. And we did some interesting things. We did one of the first shows that was originally sold to Hulu with Shaquille O'Neal and ended up blowing up and never happening. We did something on BitTorrent in the music space, and we were doing really cool kind of cutting edge stuff, but there wasn't any money yet. And so it took a little time. And then eventually I met my partner, Nick Reed, who's an ex-Hollywood agent, and he's won an Academy Award. And then was the time, it was about 2014 when the world was ready for it. And that's when we launched Shareability. And it's kind of been a crazy ride ever since.
So let's talk about shareability. First of all, the whole, that word itself, you guys made up that word?
When we called our company Shareability, it wasn't in the dictionary yet.
Okay.
So people were kind of talking about it. I don't want to take credit that we made it up, but we definitely grabbed it and we've got the .com and we've kind of owned it.
So what do you think is the thing that most people get wrong when trying to create a shareable content? And when I say people, I'm definitely talking about like dream drivers, people with ideas, people with brands who are trying to like build an audience or community.
They make it about themselves. That's the biggest mistake that we always see, is that human nature is that, hey, I'm going to build a brand around me. So I'm going to talk about me. And I think, nobody's going to love yourself more than yourself, or maybe your mom. But the biggest mistake is that you make it about yourself. Big part of the book that we talk about is focus on value. Mm-hmm. It's a really simple concept, but it's basically, if you want to go reach an audience, you identify that audience, you do your homework on that audience to figure out what they want, not what you want to give, but what they want to watch, and then find a way to give it to them, but put it in your unique voice. Right. And that idea of value is a really simple and powerful concept, and most people miss it.
You know what? To make this interesting for our audience, as we kind of go through some of your other tips that you share in the book, let's create a dummy company, or let's create a dummy brand, right? What's your favorite type of food?
Let's go with pizza.
Okay. Let's say we are a pizza company, and give me a state.
I grew up in Wisconsin, which is also the home of cheese. So let's go with that.
Okay. All right. So we'll name it. Let's name it Blacktop Pizza, right? Whatever.
Right.
That will be our dummy company as we talk through these. I think people like seeing examples, right? So let's say we are Blacktop Pizza. We come to Shareability. We're like, listen, we want to create some really shareable content. The first rule you told us was we have to find value. So then what's next?
Yeah. And by the way, if we're going to create a company, I would even back up, because people talk about content. But if content doesn't align with the core mission of the company and with the product, the content's going to fall short.
Okay. So is that a bad idea? Because I was just thinking of a random
No, I love it. I love it. But what I'm saying is, okay, so let's think about what how Blacktop Pizza is going to be shareable, right? So is Blacktop Pizza a millennial brand?
Yes.
All right. So what do millennials want in their brands?
They normally want, they want to feel entertained, or they want to feel, is that what you're asking? Like, what do they want? Meaning?
No, they want to be a part of the experience.
Yeah.
I think is what you're getting at. They want clean ingredients, right? And they want good for the environment in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of these millennial brands are super transparent. They're all about like bringing the freshest ingredients. People want to put good things in their body, right? And then it's good for the environment. It's farmed in the right way, and all those things. And so I think if those are some of the value propositions that we get from the audience, we go, hey, this is what, if our audience is looking for a pizza that they can feel good about, where they can feel part of the conversation. It's relevant to them. It wasn't made for their mom or dad. It was made for them, right? It's fresh. It's got clean ingredients. It's done in a way that's good for their world or their environment. It has a mission.
They give back to them. They give back with every purchase of a pizza. You're helping a local nonprofit that, you know how that is. People how they always have some kind of feel good with it.
No, that's right. You have the Blacktop Foundation, and you're giving back into the local communities, right?
Yeah.
And so, now if you have a base that's on those principles of value, now when we go out and start talking about the brand and we create content, we're going to create content that's based on what we already know the audience wants.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
So we'll create content about all our ingredients and where it comes from and how high quality it is and how good it is for your body. We'll bring in experts that will tell you why this pizza is better than other pizzas. There are Domino's, which is bad for your body, right? We'll create content about how we're helping all these people in the local community, and we're getting involved, and we're part of the solution, not part of the problem. And now you can think of 1,000 different ideas that would roll off that core mission because you made the brand shareable.
Yeah, that's really important. I think that's also the thing that intimidates a lot of people, because there's so much stuff that goes then into creating. Let's say we're trying to create some kind of brand video that's an introduction to who an introduction to Blacktop Pizza, right? Or getting people excited about visiting Wisconsin to have this experience. When it comes to actually creating the video in the book, Break Through the Noise, the 9 Rules to Capture Global Attention, you talk about finding your voice, right? Why is that important as well? Yeah,
I think, the setup for the book is how I view the world. And basically it's this idea that 30, 40 years ago, all of the megaphones in our society, if you wanted to get a message out in a big mass way, all the megaphones were either owned by big corporations, right? So it was like the movie studios and the television networks and the radio companies. And so if you wanted to become famous in the 1980s, you basically had to go through the Hollywood system, right? Or if you wanted to go get a brand message out, you had to create this thing called a commercial and spend millions of dollars. And so that was just the way it was. And then the internet came along and changed everything. And so now basically in 2019, we have basically a movie studio in our pocket where we can broadcast to the world. Mm-hmm. Right. And so this has kind of ushered in this era where people can go viral and YouTube famous and in the basement of their mom's house and all these things. So, the good news in 2019 is that everybody has a megaphone. The bad news in 2019 is that everyone has a megaphone and they are shouting into it constantly, right? All day long, to the point that most people, especially younger people, have tuned out almost everything that comes across their feed, right? So if you think you're going to stand out in this day and age, I think you got to be realistic and you got to say, hey, everybody's trying to stand out. So I need to bring a voice that's unique into this place. And it has to be a unique voice that is all about who I am and a perspective that only I can bring to the world. And so that's combined with value. You say, okay, what does the audience want? The audience wants this type of message and this type of content. Now, how could I, Raina, bring that message to them in a way that no one else can? And it's not easy, right? You're trying to defy the odds, but if you can do it, it can be really powerful. And one of the things I always talk about is people always think, hey, you got millions of views, or you became an international superstar, or you're working with brands that have millions of dollars. That's not me. I say the opposite. Like if you can understand these principles, they're just really valuable no matter who you are. If you're getting hundreds of views right now, these principles can help you get thousands of views. It can help you, take your followers from 5,000 to 50,000, or it can make you the most popular kid in your high school, right? It doesn't have to be about taking over the world. It can be incremental steps that if you understand these things, it'll take you farther than where you are today. And that's the first step.
Yeah, and I really like what you said, because I think sometimes we all think we have to be the next 30 million views on YouTube, right? Maybe just getting content that gets you to 1,000 views will have the impact that you need versus creating video that gets you only 50 views. I think so much times, like a lot of us get discouraged because we think you have to go viral, as they say, but maybe you just need to be more effective than you are. And using these tools will get you a larger, a larger audience than you would have had if you hadn't used these.
Amen. No, that's exactly right. And I feel like what we see, everybody talks about going viral, and we've done videos with hundreds of millions of views, and that's great. But it's a needle in a haystack, right? And so I always think in terms of like social following, I feel like you can get to 500, 1,000 followers on Instagram or other platforms just from friends and family and working it. Mm-hmm. But you that's where you top out. I think one of the hardest things to do in social is get to like 10,000 followers.
Tell me about it. I'm more like 6,000. I started Dreams and Drive 3.5 years ago.
It's hard, right?
It's hard.
But what I'll say to you is like if you look at the numbers, the number of people that make it to 6,000 or 10,000, when you look at a percentage of people that are trying, you've already defied all the odds. And although it doesn't feel like it because it's been a grind, that's the hardest part. Because if you can get to 10,000, in my opinion, you found a base that resonates, mm-hmm. and you've had to do it the hard way. Unless you just had some random viral hit, you've had to provide value in a way that people are relating to and they're getting value from. And then getting to 10,000 is the hardest part. I'm telling you, it's much easier to get from 10,000 to 100,000 than it is to get from 1,000 to 10,000. Infinitely easier.
One other thing another rule that you have in the book that I think is really important, and it's really important for me because I create audio content, so I have to really incite people to click on things, is crushing the headline. Why is that such an important part of creating shareable content?
Yeah, so it goes back into what we talked about earlier, which is that everyone's just bombarded with a million messages every day.
Yeah.
And so I always say that people, blow through social media like a serial dater on Tinder, like swiping and swiping and swiping. And it's crazy. And we watch anyone that understands social, the way they go through it and the speed, and then they stop for just a split second, check something out, and then they're gone again. And once they're gone forever. So if you have to crush the headline. And what that means is that when someone sees your content, they have to immediately understand what it is and why it's valuable to them. And I think one of the mistakes people make is they try to get really way too clever with their title or with their thumbnail or whatever that might be. It's like, no, focus on the value of the content that you have a really clean headline that tells people exactly what it is, and connect the headline with the image so that they immediately know if this is for them. And then if it's video content, we call it giving up the goat. That's one of our concepts, which is like you have to give away the best part of the video first. Because if you don't do that, people are their attention span's too short. They're going to be gone. So basically it's this concept that you take the best part of the video, you play it for 3 or 4 seconds up front to reel people in. And then once you have them, you have the ability to go tell your story. But it all has to work together. And like understanding that headline and crushing that headline is a big part of it.
So here, I have a question for you, because I feel like there is some content, like, the stream of consciousness content that goes viral, right? And then there's content that is engineered and executed well, that there's a strategy behind that goes viral. Do you need to have a mix of both? Or does that stream of consciousness only work for like people like Cardi B? Because she could just say anything and then goes viral. So
yeah, well, that's the power of like having built your community, right? Like once they understand your value, you have that platform forever. I think that a lot of the streaming consciousness is tough. You see some of that stuff break through, but I think it's that kind of same viral moment where something will happen, where the timing is right, that this took off based on something that's kind of happening in the national consciousness. I always feel like you need to figure out what you're doing that's working. And I feel like one of the mistakes people make is they do homework on other people, or they study people they want to be like, but they don't do homework on themselves. And it sounds really, really silly and simple, but the biggest improvement you can make, if you're posting content, let's say you're posting content, how often do you post content?
On which platform? Like just releasing the podcast, or like on social media?
No, like on Instagram. How often do you post a week on Instagram?
I try to do once a day, because people love their daily morning motivation quotes. That's what I realized. People don't like seeing my videos. They don't like seeing photos. They just want these little quotes in a very specific font. I've been trying to figure out the font, and that's what they engage with, they share with, they save it. They don't care about anything else, I'm realizing. And I don't know why.
But that's super interesting, right? So you've done some of that homework on yourself. What I always tell people is like, okay, if you're posting 7 times a week and you've been doing it for 3 or 4 years or whatever, right? You've got like over 1,000 data points on things that you've posted over the last few years that you're not using to understand what people are really engaging with and what they find value with. So I'll have people, what I'll have them do is just create like a simple spreadsheet and say, okay, what are the types of content you create? Like put it into buckets, and then you do it however you want or whatever feels good to you. But maybe you create 5 buckets, and one of them's about, when you're being funny, or one of them's inspirational, or one of them's when you share something really personal, or one of them's when you make people happy. And you put these categories together, and then go through all your videos and put them in one of the categories. Okay. And then go back and look at the engagements. And when I talk engagements, I'm like, okay, likes, comments, shares. And we weight those differently. But for this exercise, just count them all the same and say, hey, this post has 100 engagements. This one has 300 engagements. This one has 50 engagements. This one has 1,000 engagements. And then literally chart all 1,000 of those. And when you do that, you will see some really interesting patterns that will inform what people are finding valuable about your content. And then you can replicate as a strategy moving forward. I mean, it sounds like you've found out that they want inspirational quotes in a certain format, and that's how they want to engage with you, or at least based on the content you've delivered so far, that's been the most effective.
Yeah.
So even though that might be frustrating, that's also a huge insight, right? And so you're like, okay, this is, my audience likes this. How do I give them more of this? How do I take this concept up to a higher level? It doesn't mean that they don't want, you in a different way doing something like that. It just means based on what you've posted so far, that's the thing that they've connected with the most. And I think that can be super instructive in terms of how you build your content moving forward.
And part of what you're saying that you also cover is you have to test, right? You can't just imagine. You actually have to put things out there and collect the data, go back and analyze that data. Talk to me a little bit more about that testing concept and how our creators can be more efficient and be more productive in their shareability if they actually do it. Yeah,
we test everything. I mean, literally everything at every stage. And so we're actually kind of fanatical about it. But but you listen, I mean, like the things that drive virality and shareability are things that, there are certain principles that you have to follow. But then it hits the real world, right? And we always say you never know until it goes live. You just never know. And people may not, you're the closest to any content that you create. So you're going to understand it in a way that they may not. And so it may not connect the way you think it's going to when it launches. So test everything you can. For us, that's a pretty sophisticated process. But for you, figure out how to just launch different versions of a video or try different typefaces on an inspirational quote. There are really simple tools, especially on Facebook, where you can run what's called dark posts. And you just Google it on the internet. You can figure it out. It's not that hard to figure out. You can set up these ad accounts and put in, $10, $20, $100, whatever. And then you can run, versions of your content to specific audience groups and see how they engage with your content. It actually doesn't go to your main feed, so you don't have to be like spamming all your followers, but it goes to people that you want to target. And it's so amazing because you launched 3 different versions of this video that you spent all this time on. And the one that you love gets, 50 engagements, and the one that you revise that has a completely different spin gets 150 engagements. And you're like, oh, the way I thought it would go out is not the way that they're engaging with it. So it's just this matter of it's a mindset of how do I just test everything I do to ensure that I'm putting the right content out so I can maximize the impact when it goes live, and do it in the smallest ways possible. And it'll have a huge, huge impact. We find it to be exponential. Like the difference between the video we thought was going to go well and the one we actually tested and launched, it can be 5x the final result.
Really? Wow.
It can be huge.
Wow. I think that also just goes to show that it's not a quick fix. A lot of people might view their content strategy as just being something that they can just get done in a day. So why do you think it's important then to really make sure that you're not being lackadaisical with how you approach your content? Because a lot of people just try to just put up anything and they don't really put thought into it and then still want results.
Yeah, you're either in it or you're not, right? You either got to be committed to building it, or you should just, otherwise just do it as a social, add-on, right? Like just something you enjoy doing and only post when you want to. I just don't feel like there's a middle ground. I think a lot of people think they want to be internet famous, but they're not willing to put in the work or figure out what's shareable about them or what's valuable about them that people actually engage with. And that's fine. Like if that's how you feel about it, then test around. And if you strike lightning, that's great. It's probably not going to happen. But I do feel like if you're willing to put in the work, you're willing to understand where the value is, and you're willing to develop your unique voice and test all kinds of contents and fail until you find something that actually works, it's going to be super valuable. And whether that means you have, 1,000 followers or 100,000 followers or millions of followers or whatever that is, it's going to be super valuable for you as you go about your career and about your life.
You know what I want to ask you? How do you actually create, once you create, you can create shareable content, but how do you create content that grows your community? Or the two go hand in hand?
Yeah, I think in the way we define it, it's very much the same.
Okay.
And I think one of the big changes of the last 4 or 5 years is like when we first started Shareability, we were known for doing these big viral videos, and we still are. But I think the world just got so much busier now. It's got so much louder, and the platforms, the algorithms have changed, and it's harder and harder to go viral. And also, when something goes viral, it's like lightning it's striking, and you can't really control it. It's not really something that you can just go out and do again, a week later, right? It's a kind of unpredictable event. So, but Shareable is all about how do I give value to a community so that they help me grow my community with me. And so I think that's the big difference is like, yeah, when you're thinking about viral ideas, you're trying to think about how do I do something that's super crazy that's going to set the internet on fire. And those ideas, they have to be really unique and almost sometimes very stunty. Mm-hmm. So they don't feel authentic in a lot of ways. Whereas if you're just focused on being shareable, then it's all about how do I focus in on these 1,000 people and give them people what they want so they engage with me on a day-to-day basis. And so then they start sharing with their friends and family and followers. And then my 1,000 becomes 2,000, my 2,000 becomes 5,000, my 5,000 becomes 10,000, and so on and so forth. And so I think it's all interconnected, and it's all about value, because I think if you can focus on them, that's where the growth is going to come.
So I have to ask you about the behind the scenes with one of my favorite videos that your firm produced was the Cristiano Ronaldo in disguise video, right?
Yeah. It's crazy.
Describe to me what, for people who don't know what it is, describe to us what it was and then why it worked.
Yeah. So Cristiano Ronaldo, if you don't know, he's one of the biggest soccer players in the world, global football. And he also has the biggest social media following in the world.
180 million?
Yeah, it's over. Yeah, in total with all the platforms, I think it's 250 million.
What the heck?
And on Facebook, it's 130 or 140 million. It's just crazy. And so just rabid fan base. And so when we started working with him, we always look and we say, hey, what is this person, what do they stand for? When you're dealing with a celebrity, the voice is already pretty defined. So we look at, hey, how can we put a different spin on it? How can we flip the script? This is one of the concepts we talk about, and like present this person in a new light. And with Ronaldo, he'd always been presented as like this kind of Greek god, Adonis-like figure. He's a really good looking guy. He looks like a model. He's a great football player. He destroys on the pitch. And so he's just been this really distant, aspirational, inspirational character, and people love him for it, but they always feel a distance removed from him. So when we sat with him, we said, hey, we want to do things a little bit differently and have people connect with you on a different level. And so we wanted to bring him down to more of an everyman level and kind of program exactly against how he'd been presented for the last 30 years. And so we created this concept where we put him in disguise and basically dressed him up like a homeless guy, like a guy that would be out on the street performing soccer tricks for money. And we put a big beard on him, hair and sunglasses. And then we took him out into one of the busiest plazas in Madrid where he used to play. And this is a spot where he can't walk like three steps without getting mobbed, like, the biggest rock star in the world. And so, and then we had him out there for an hour and a half, just performing tricks and like trying to get attention. And it was so fascinating because this guy who just used to being adorned in every direction just couldn't get arrested. And he was doing all these tricks and he asked the girl for her phone number and she blew him off and he took anybody to pay attention to him. And it just went on. And then right at the end, he started interacting with a young kid, a young boy, and they started playing back and forth and Ronaldo started teaching him some tricks. And then the boy stole the ball away from Ronaldo and it was this awesome little moment. And then Ronaldo waved him over and the kid was all confused and he grabbed the soccer ball and he pulled a Sharpie out of his pocket. And he started signing the ball. And then he started pulling his mask off. And then the kid's face just lit up like a Christmas tree. And like within 7 seconds, like it seemed like 1,000 people had swarmed around him. And we had to like hustle him off of the square. But it was just this really cool moment that we captured. And I think the reason why it was so powerful, it did hundreds of millions of views. It did 3 million shares. It was one of the biggest, campaigns in, the history of the internet. And I think the reason why it really resonated is we took this kind of godlike figure and we made him an everyday man, and we made a connection. And then we ultimately made a connection with a kid and had this awesome moment. And that
wasn't script, right?
No, it wasn't. Like we're super fluid on those videos. Like we're always pushing things in directions, right? We always don't just let chaos happen. Okay. Like we always prep and prepare to push in directions, but you have to do it on the set, and you just have to let it happen as it happens. And so that was just this glorious moment that came about, and we just roll with it. And that was ultimately the goal that made it go so viral.
I love talking about this, and we could talk about this all day, but like, what do you think, Tim, is what encouragement would you give to that dream driver who is just really, I guess, doubtful that they'll ever be able to create content that resonates?
Yeah, the thing I would say is if you're serious about it, if you're not serious about it, then don't spend the time on it. But if you're serious about it, I promise you have something unique to give to the world. And the problem is not that you don't have the talent. The problem is that you have to find what that unique voice is. And you have to put in the work and understand what the audience wants that you want to go after. Or maybe you have to find a different audience that will relate to you in a different way. But if you stay at it and you put in the time and you put in the work and you test and you really focus on providing value for people and you're in it for the long run, it may not be what you think it's going to be, but it will be incredibly valuable for you. And you'll look back over time and you'll be grateful for the time you spent, because you may not become, an Instagram superstar, but it may get you a better job, or it may help you start your own company, or it may help you become this unbelievable, personality or speaker, or write a book someday. And so the world has so much opportunity now for people that are willing to put in the work and are willing to develop that kind of skill set of how to talk to people online. So what I would say is, yeah, it's hard. Yeah, you're going to fail. Yeah, everyone's trying to do it, but go for it and lean into what your gut tells you, and just make it happen, and you'll be better off for it. I promise you.
And for those who say, hey, I don't have a lot of money to invest, right? Like, what are the things that you would say? All right, you don't have a lot of money, but if you have some money, this is what you should be investing in. Like, what are some of the tools or just necessary things for creating shareable content?
Yeah. If you have limited budgets, if you have limited dollars, I would spend all your money on testing. I would spend all your money on research and testing, because I feel like those are the golden bullets. It's like, find out who the audience is that's going to really be your audience, your champion. There's a book out there, I think it's called 1,000 True Fans. And it says that if you can find 1,000 people that love what you do, you have a career, right? And you have a bounce board to go build and grow from. And so figure out on the front side how you find those 1,000 true fans. And then when you start making content, just don't be precious with it. You're not going to get it right. If you have a small audience, very few people are going to see it. You just have to get over the fact that not all of it's going to be great. But you just spend any money you have on testing it and running dark posts and trying to figure out what people are responding to. Because sometimes it takes a lot of time to really find the one thing that can break through. You can try 100 things, and then the one thing finally resonates, and then all your efforts are around that one thing. And so that's where I would spend the time and the money.
So it's not about the camera lens. It's not about having the most expensive, iPhone. It's not about that stuff. I think a lot of us get caught up in that.
I was on a podcast recently where the host, who's an awesome guy, went on about how he was going to take his game to the next level because he just spent all this money on this 3D 360 camera, and he was expecting me to be really excited for him, and I just went silent. And he's like, what? And I was like, that does nothing for you. If you haven't figured out where your value is and where your emotional connection is, the camera is just a camera. It's not going to create those things. In fact, it's just going to make it worse. Like doing something in 360 or, 3D is just going to make you feel more distant, and it's going to accentuate what you haven't figured out yet. The camera doesn't matter. If you've got an iPhone or Android, you've got what you need. You have the technology. Now figure out the value in the voice.
Tim, we've been talking a lot about the shareability mission and your tips, but for you, like, I know running a business can be hard, having team members can be hard. What keeps you personally motivated? What keeps you going at points where you may feel like giving up?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, everybody that's out there, hustling and doing their own thing or freelancing or whatever that might be, you're going to hit really rough moments. And I've hit them. I still hit them. And you feel like you're never over the hump. And I think for me, it's just about being grateful for the things that you have. And I think there's got to be, some kind of separation, in terms of, who you are and how you take care of yourself. And then, being thankful for your family and your friends and things that aren't related to work or social. That for me, I've got my wife and we have a young family, we have a young son and a young daughter. And man, I spend the weekends and I'm just super grateful. And we're super close. And that foundation means that no matter how much the wind blows, that I'm okay to go back to work on Monday and go figure it out. And I think, entrepreneurship can be a really debilitating process. And I don't think enough gets written about how tough it can be on young founders and the people that are trying to make things happen. And there's not enough resources or support for how much it beats you down, and see a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression that people aren't talking about. So I say, it's like, don't take it too seriously. Try to focus on the things that matter to you, whatever that is, friends and family and things that you care about, and have that balance. The work's going to come, but you got to take care of you first, because if you're not right, you're never going to be able to figure out the other side.
Thank you for sharing that, 'cause I think that's so real. I think it's something we talk a lot about on the show. There's so many things people don't tell you about it that you don't realize until you're in it. But you have to take that time for self-care, and you have to take that time to just remember that you're still a human beyond what you're building. Let's go into our lightning round. So, you cannot be a dream driver without having your keys to success, Tim. So tell me what you think are 3 things every dream driver needs in their toolkit before they hit the road.
Yeah. So the first one for me is optimism. And I think, unfortunately, you're either born with it or you're not. I think you can a bit, but I think to really build something from scratch, you have to be like irrationally optimistic. Like I've always found in my career, like I've just believed that whatever was going to happen is going to happen. And it may not happen the way you think it's going to happen, but like that belief is what gets you through the tough times. And really, just the idea of being positive in any situation, because it's just always going to be hard, and you have to understand that. And if you can't have that optimism, if you can't see that finish line, even when no one else can, I think it's going to be really tough. So optimism, like lean into optimism and lean into gratitude. I think that's really important.
Okay.
Number 2 is, I touched on it before, but learn how to sell. Like I said, you can have the best ideas ever, but if you can't sell them, you got nothing. So, whatever that is for you, whether it's taking a job or whether it's practicing how you present, or it's just presenting to all your friends before you do it in the real world or in your career, just really focus on sell. Try to sell a lot of stuff all the time and see what people respond to, because otherwise you spend all this time building something out and you put your heart and soul into it, and the world never sees it because you don't know how to sell it. And number 3, I believe in having a sense of humor. Because along this journey, if you don't laugh, you're going to cry. And I just feel like you got to enjoy the time. You only get one life, and business is business, and it's awesome, and you want to build what you're going to build, but you have to live a life, and you have to enjoy that journey. So it's never going to be easy as you think. So when things go wrong, try to just laugh it off. Some of the biggest breakthroughs in my career have been when the worst things have happened and I've taken a step back and I thought, that things were over, and then something else pops up and it goes in a completely different direction and much more, productive and successful than I thought it was going to be originally. So to have that sense of humor, enjoy it, be good to people, and just, and just hustle.
I love that. Optimism, learn how to sell, and have that sense of humor. Tim, thank you so much for being on this episode. Can you tell our dream drivers where they can find you online if they want to learn more about Shareability and what you guys are doing?
Yeah, so you can find us on shareability.com. You can check out the company. I'm on Twitter at Micadala, Micodala, Micadala, and on Instagram at Staples Tim.
Okay, that was really good. How'd you enjoy it?
I loved it. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, no, it's an interesting conversation. And I think like leaning into that, I don't know how much you talk about the mental side about it and how difficult it is. But I feel like that's an area that like not enough people are talking about, like how hard this journey is.
And you know what? I really think it's even harder for the people that know that they can't go back. Or not, but do you get what I mean? In the sense of like, when you know in your heart that you really want to do it, and going back to, let's say, because I quit my 9 to 5, actually 1 year ago, August 15, 2018, right? But I know for me, if I don't find the right environment, going back would be just as miserable. So it's like, what do you do when both options are miserable, but one is miserable with a better payoff? Like one is miserable that's leading you to happiness eventually, right? So it's really hard. And I think especially for creatives, because what we do is it's hard to describe, and it's also hard to see the money, especially if you're not scaled yet, right? You don't have the clients. It's really hard to monetize creative ideas a lot of times. So it's a tough situation, but I think having conversations and hearing from you and having people tell their stories, that's how you get the conversation going.
Yeah, amen. Now more people need to have it because there's so much rah-rah entrepreneur bullshit out there. I feel like, and I do agree, you got to burn the ships, right? Like if you're going to do it, you got to do it. Like, you leave your job and you go for it. But I also feel like if I had to do it over again, I feel like there's an in-between there somewhere, right? Where you maybe you stay a little bit longer and you build a couple relationships so that you either leave with your first client, right? Or that you built a relationship with an investor that underwrites what you do. And maybe you don't own 100% of the company, maybe you only own 50%, but you get a salary, right? Or some kind of joint venture that kind of like softens the initial blow. Cause I just see young people. I mean, everyone's trying to live the dream of being an entrepreneur, but it leads to a lot of pain and heartbreak.
Yeah. And I think also that finances issue is a big one too. A lot of people will quit and then be dead broke and just be sad. I'm like, no, I quit and I had lots of money in my savings account, and I had to actually I had a strategy so that I would not have to have the stress of a financial burden. Because if you're trying to be creative and you have no money, you can't eat, you can't think, it just becomes miserable to the ultimate degree. So.
Yeah, and the last piece on that is like you have to act like you're successful, right? So you're in conflict with yourself, right? You're miserable and broke, but you're trying to act like you're killing it. And like, I feel like that's the worst situation in the world, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Being real. And that's why I think a lot of people are trying to be more transparent. And a lot of people are also pushing the side hustle. Like, it's okay to do this creative stuff as a side hustle until you're able. And sometimes you may never actually do it full time, but just having that outlet to be able to do it is what's really important. And you can even be entrepreneurial within a company, and you can find ways to explore these passions to create. You could do all this testing on your company's budget, figure out your formula, and then use that for your own projects as well.
I think that's really smart. I think, but like you said, something that it's like, hey, maybe you should spend all that entrepreneurial time actually finding a job that you like.
Yeah.
The other concept that's been banging around my head lately is just like, this idea that everyone needs to be the number one, they need to be the founder, the entrepreneur. Maybe some people should be trained to be the number two. Like maybe their role is to be the one that like partners with a true entrepreneur and like makes them better. And like that partnership could be really valuable and for both sides, right? And then that person can take more of the stress, and you can take more of the, hey, how do we make this thing go? I don't know. That's something that's been banging around my head. It's just like there's so much focus on being the number one. Like maybe that's not for everyone.
I love that you said that. I was just having this conversation. So I have a mastermind group with like 2 of my friends from college, and every 2 weeks we just talk about things. And we were going back and forth about this idea. Like maybe we're not realizing where our real talent is. And there is, like you said, there is a talent in being like the operations person, or there is a talent in being assistant in the way of like you can see things that sometimes visionaries cannot see.
Yes.
And embrace that. It's okay if you're not the visionary. It's okay if you like the numbers. It's okay if your favorite thing to do is to build floor plans, right? Yeah. That there's a place for all of us, and I think we just have to learn to embrace those places.
Amen. No, amen. I think that's really smart.
All right, Tim, thanks so much. I enjoyed the book.
Yeah, thank you. I love what you're doing. I think it's really smart, and stay with it on the social stuff, and just try a bunch of new stuff. Like, always be trying new stuff. I know it can get frustrating when you start to hit walls.
Yeah, people don't want to see my picture. They don't even want to see pictures of the guest. I even tried audiograms. I'm thinking maybe I really just need to do more video content. They like repost. They like content that's not even, like, I don't really like to repost content, but when I do that, they love it. Like, when Nipsey Hussle died, I reposted that stuff about his entrepreneurship things. Like, they like things that they might have seen before, but it's weird. It's weird. So I definitely am testing things.
Yeah, but I know how it feels. Like, hey, they don't like pictures of me, or they don't like pictures of my guest. They like this other stuff. But like, just get over it. Like, and like, embrace it. You know what I mean? Like, I know you know that, but it's like, and then everything will open up, because if you let them, you don't want to just give them whatever they want, right? But I think you really focus on what's resonating, and it'll take you down a path, and then you'll figure out how to put yourself back in the middle of that in a way that feels really natural.
They like it in the context of aspirational. So if I post, let's say, a picture and I say, I just reached 1 million downloads, they like that because they see it as, oh, she's doing, like, they like the aspirational things, like hitting certain accomplishments or press features. That's where I'm realizing they'll engage. But it makes sense, because it's kind of like, oh, I can do that too. Or, oh, this is working for her. So maybe the content that she's sharing, if I listen to some of it, I can hit it too. So that's where I'm realizing there's some engagement. It has to be shared with value, as you said, or some kind of purpose.
Have you focused on much content where you're highlighting one of your audience or somebody in your world on success that they've had from some of the learnings?
You know what's funny? I just did a campaign, or just asked people to sign up. So I want to do this concept called carpools, where basically I have these little 15-minute short interviews with people talking about their experience with the show and how they're building their own dream driving journeys. So that's actually something. I have 20 people signed up. I was so surprised that people signed up so quickly. So, I always think about, like, how do I shine a spotlight on people that are doing stuff that are in my world, and like make it about them, not about me. Yeah. And you find a twist there where you're like, hey, you're grinding, you're doing your thing, but you're also shining a light on people that are hustling and learning with you. I think that could be really powerful. Yeah, and I know I have to do the video. Everyone's like, Raina, do the videos. People want to see you interview people in person, but it's just so much easier. Like we're having a conversation now, and we're not even in person. So there's a mix that I have to start thinking about.
Yeah, and do it in steps. Don't feel intimidated or overwhelmed by it. Just like, hey, how can I start doing some video? I don't have to do everything in video. Just take some small steps and see where it takes you.
All right, Tim. Well, I could talk your ear off for another hour. Thanks so much.
And I love what you're doing. So stay in touch, and we'll connect at some point down the line.
All right. So that's a wrap for episode 226 with Tim. I hope you enjoyed hearing his dream driving journey as well as his keys to success. And remember, if you want to enter to win his book, Break Through the Noise, The 9 Rules to Capture Global Attention, please go to dreamsanddrive.com/join. That's dreamsanddrive.com/join. If you love this episode and want to share with your own community, and you feel like other people would really benefit from hearing these driver's ed tips, please just make sure to screenshot us, post us to Instagram, post us to Twitter, Facebook, wherever you are. We are Dreams and Drive across the board, and you can use the hashtag Dreams and Drive as well. Remember, I count on y'all every week to share these episodes with your own communities. So please, that's the most important thing that you can do after listening, is to share this with your community in some way. If you want to be part of our Dreams and Drive email newsletter, The Keys, just go to dreamsanddrive.com/join. That's dreamsanddrive.com/join. And remember, if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, please leave us a rating and review. Those ratings and reviews really mean a lot. And I want to read the most recent one that we have. This one is coming from My Kiatu. It says, great first listen for new entrepreneurs. Wow. For my first listen at a podcast ever, I picked the right one. Thank you so much, guys. So I want to read your review in the next episode. So to do that, just go to Apple Podcasts, click on ratings and review, and write a review, and I'll read it on next week's show. And if you're not on Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening, make sure that you're hitting that subscribe button. so that you get notifications every time we have a new episode. Subscribing to the community on your audio platforms is super, super important. All right, guys, I don't know about you, but after editing and listening to this episode again, I realized there's a lot of tips that I can implement right now. So I'm going to go to my notes, start seeing what I can do and how I can start creating Dreams and Drive content that you guys really enjoy. If you have any tips, any suggestions, always know you can hit me up on Instagram or you can send me an email, raina@dreamsanddrive.com. All right, keep dreaming, keep driving, and we'll chat again soon. Bye, guys.